My name is Michelle Webb, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the Behavioral Health System Manager for Boulder County. And I just want to thank all of you for making time to be here this afternoon and this evening. We know it's the end of the day, so we appreciate you taking time out. We appreciate our panel for being here to share with us. We're really excited to have this great group here and wanted to, just let you all know how this came to be. So this really stems from our work with the Behavioral Health Roadmap. I know that many of you here are familiar with the roadmap. For those of you who are not, the Behavioral Health Roadmap is a process that our community went through together over about a year and a half to 2 years to look at how we could address mental health and substance use in our community in a different way, and how we could come together to have and create a more collaborative, cohesive system. And one of the primary visions that came out of that entire process was making sure that all of our community members can access the care that they need when they need it in a community that has a strong sense of belonging. So from that, we started and launched our Spotlight series at the end of last year in December. And really the goal of that is about how do we get our community members connected to the amazing services that do exist within our community. So it really is about increasing access through awareness of the services that exist so that people know how to get connected. So tonight, what we have in store for you all is a panel discussion with various partners in our community. We're going to talk about peer support professionals, what their work is about, the recovery community, and also recovery housing. And along with that, the great network of care that's being built to support all of that. So, before we dive in, I do want to also acknowledge, in the short period of time we have together over the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, we could only bring in so many partners to share. And across our community, there are many others who are involved in this work, doing peer support services and recovery work. And we just want to acknowledge them as well. So it's very possible that tonight is just a part one of a much bigger conversation that we'll be starting. As we go through the panel at the very end, we will reserve time for Q&A. So we ask that everyone hold your questions. We'll have time at least 20 minutes towards the end. At that time, we'll let you know, you can put your questions in the chat, use the raise hand feature, and we'll do our best to address as many people's questions as possible tonight. I'll be the person to help keep all of us on track time-wise. So when we get to 5:30, you might hear me jump in. I'm not trying to be rude or interrupt anyone. I just want to offer support to our panel to let them know where we are on time. And then again, probably at 10 minutes before 6 so that we can make sure that we have that time to answer all of your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dee. Dee Waldron from Advocates for Recovery. Dee, we'd love you to introduce yourself. Thank you so much for being here to be our moderator for this great discussion. So tell us about yourself, how you came into this work, and what it is that you all are building together.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Michelle and Morrison, personally, for facilitating this for so many people. Firstly, hello, everyone who's joined us tonight. I want to thank all of you for being here. My name is Dee Waldron. I prefer they, them pronouns. I am a person in active and sustained recovery. And what that means to me is that I no longer have a problematic relationship with substances or mind-altering substances. I have lived experience with navigating being in jail, navigating child protection services, navigating what I have coined from a co-facilitator of mine. I like to call them mental health adventures. Um, and this conversation is so incredibly close to my heart, not only because of the work in this field, but because I've seen firsthand how peer support can spark hope, empower change, and create a sense of belonging for people walking the path of recovery or wellness. We have a really incredible group of panelists joining us today, each of them bringing unique experiences and incredibly deep wisdom to this conversation. I'm so excited to get to know everybody here very shortly. We'll be exploring what peer support looks like in action and how it intersects with recovery communities, housing, access, and more. For me personally, at Advocates for Recovery Colorado, one of my titles is the peer networking coordinator. And so that means that I have started to build an infrastructure for peer support professionals only. So often we are taking our participants or taking people who are in early recovery to our community. And that limits our access to avenues of wellness and self-care for ourselves that isn't enmeshed with those that we're supporting. So two of the things that I have to offer for the other peer support professionals in the room is I facilitate a Zoom in the morning at 7:30 on Fridays. It's called ECHO, which means Empowering Community Helping Others. And we have started an in-person peer support professional networking event that's the fourth Wednesday of every month, and it's called BRANCH, which is an acronym for Building Relationships and Networking Community Harmony. So this honors the wisdom that peers have to bring. It's an infrastructure that protects our energy, and it challenges systems that too often forget the humanity of the helper. So we see you, I see you, and that is part of what I am doing at AFR. So that's enough about me. I would really like to start introducing our other panelists and getting to know them. So whomever would like to go first, if you could please briefly introduce yourself and share with everyone what brought you into this work. Why are you up here? I can start calling on people too.
I'll go. I'm happy to be with you guys. You guys are super humble. I'm humble to be with you guys. You guys are amazing. I'm just a grad student. I work at Tribe Recovery Homes in Boulder on Pearl Street. I've been working here for 2 years as a peer navigator. Um, and we work with men primarily. Tribe does have a footprint down in Denver. They do sober living and residential treatment. We work with Department of Corrections and unhoused populations. What got me into this field is there are, I believe, over 100,000 overdoses every year. And that tragic fact, I have some personal experience with. So I realized like there's not a lot being done, and maybe if things were done, um, maybe I wouldn't have lost some people. So just here to help, honestly. And I hope that, I think this is a good message to get out. Perhaps if this message was out and more people knew about some resources, maybe we could really save some lives. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Justin. Who'd like to go next?
I can go. My name is Carlisle. I work with Rocky Mountain Equality, formerly known as Out Boulder County, as their peer support specialist. I've been in this role for 2 years, and I have the privilege of working with other LGBTQ plus folks who are navigating early recovery. Um, Part of the reason why I got into this work was because of my own lived experience. I've been sober for 6 years from um, you know, uh, my substances of choice and all substances. And something that was important to me getting into this field was working with other LGBTQ plus folks, particularly other trans people. Because I think having that intersection of both lived experiences and how they play on one another can really affect how someone navigates their recovery, including my own. And I know how important it is to have community. So part of my role is, building recovery programming specific to queer folks who are sober. So that's been very meaningful to me, and I hope to continue building on the momentum of that of this program and continuing to work with people like you who are also in this field and who have the similar lived experiences.
Thank you, Carlisle. Appreciate it. Who'd like to go next?
My name
Go ahead,
is
Leanne.
Leanne. I work for Clinica Family Health and Wellness, formerly Mental Health Partners. I've been a peer since 2005. Due to my addiction recovery. And I feel that um, for me, it's really, giving back to the community, especially, through the supports that we offer here at Clinical Family Health and Wellness through mental health support and recovery supports. I'm able to, I was able to receive help all these years and now can give back. And what we do here is we support folks in a substance use disorder intensive outpatient program in a 9 hour a week SUD ILP group. And it seems to work. And we have aftercare groups. And I'm just really proud and honored to be a part of this program here, and just honored to be a peer and give back to the community. Thanks. And I'll popcorn to Christina.
Thank you, Leanne. Go ahead, Christina.
Thank you, Leanne. Hello, everybody. My name is Christina Garcia, and I am bilingual program manager and peer support specialist here at the Recovery Cafe. And I've been in this role for about 2 years now. I've been a hairstylist all my life, and well, most of my life. And in 2015, after I had my daughter, I also had my son who was 17. And I was pregnant again. And after giving birth to my daughter, I didn't realize that I was probably suffering some postpartum depression. So I didn't know how to get connected back into the self-employed workforce. So there was a strong disconnect for me to get back into the workforce, and everything became unmanageable. So I started to drink to cope with that, and it did the job for the time being. But then more problems came once I was sober, and I masked that with more alcohol until that became unmanageable. I quickly found myself, after my daughter was about 2.5, found myself in and out of jail, and it not only there, but living on the streets to accommodate the despair that I was in. And that just, led me there. I was saved by a man who works in law enforcement here in the city of Longmont. And that was a really pivotal moment in my life that gave me an opportunity to change my life. That, and with the conjunction of his compassion and the drug court program in Boulder County and transitional housing, those were the things that changed my life. And Recovery Cafe was also a part of that. And that is what led me to, that was in 2019. And as of 2020, I've been sober and clean and in recovery. And once I once I was able to reinstate my hairstyling license, it was like I found a new passion, and it happened to be here at the Recovery Cafe. So that's what I do. I am here. I am very passionate about the work that we do and all the organizations that we get to work with. Thank you very much. And I'll go to Victor.
Thanks, Christina. My name is Vic, or Victor, pronouns he, him, and I'm a recovery coach manager at Clinical Family Health and Wellness. I'm on the training team, and I work on a federal grant called the State Opioid and Stimulant Response Grant as a recovery coach manager. So I supervise a statewide team of recovery coaches who work about 12 different agencies and up to about 17 people across the state. And I also provide no cost peer training for anyone who wants to get the state certification. So I offer 60 hours of training at no cost as also part of my role. And part of my path is similar to Christina. So what brought me to this line of work is an interesting question, but it was a crippling meth addiction and a pair of handcuffs. And so through that process, the Boulder County Jail has a number of great resources that you can take advantage of, not just the free headsets, but they have the JET program, JBBS, jail-based behavioral services. And that's where it really began. Our first application to work at MHP was sent from jail letterhead to the agency. And, 10 years later, here I am. And so some things that definitely helped that were um, embracing the programs in the county, like FITC, but also family self-sufficiency. And those programs really allowed to establish stability and to continue this line of work. And I guess I will pick Chris.
Thank you, Victor. I think you also should include mentor in that title of all yours. Yeah, so my name is Chris Poma, and I'm a Colorado Peer and Family Specialist and a program manager here at Recovery Cafe Longmont. Yeah, I think what I'm a person in recovery and been in recovery for quite a while now. And what brought me to this work, I think my life in general, I'm sure everyone on this call has, sought guidance from someone who's been there before. And I know like throughout my life, that's been where I've gotten so much of my knowledge and wisdom and like how to navigate things. And when I found Recovery Cafe, it was like, oh, dang, like, I can be that for someone. And, took Victor's 60-hour training, and that really like sparked a real interest and passion in this work. And yeah, I've been at Recovery Cafe as a staff member, going on 4 years, and volunteered for a few years. So that's what brings me here, and that's what motivates me every day.
Thank you, Chris. And I will say, since I've stepped into my role at Advocates for Recovery Colorado, Vic and Chris have both been pretty solid pillars in the beginning of my journey. And then, of course, I've gotten to meet Leanne and Carlisle and a couple new faces, Justin and Christina. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you today. We just all have very different yet similar experiences. And I think that's kind of what makes peer support the most incredible thing. So with that being said, I would love to hear from any of you, anybody who wants to speak passionately about this. What precisely does peer support mean for your experience into coming into this role? And why has that been a vital part of your recovery and wellness journey?
I will go. So to me, the term peer support is very loaded and has a lot of potential for misuse and misunderstanding. So the term I would like is a peer support professional, because peer support can just be the person walking down the street, but a peer support professional is lived experience plus training. And we've all gone through training to get where we're at. So it's not just we've been there, done that. Um, so I just want to make that clear. And a vital part of what we do is human connection. So with non-judgment, we can reshape old patterns of negative behavior and move people towards recovery. And another part of that is being role models in the community for people in or seeking recovery. If I can do it, I believe that others can do it. And for me, peer support means we focus on what is right with people and not what's wrong with them.
I love that. And you bring up a really critical point that I would like to kind of highlight and underscore is the education and the training piece. And that's essentially what defines the professional role, right? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, or because I'd be happy to add to it as well.
I may bring it up later, but I'm okay.
Sounds good. Would anybody else like to add to that? Because That was a very powerful piece that Vic said. So I would love to hear what others have to add.
Chris, are
Go
you
for it,
going?
Carlisle. Okay, I'll go after you.
Sure. Yeah, I thank you, Victor, for bringing in that piece because I think the the training and continued education is really important because it gives us the tools to work with the people who we're serving. Something that's really important in my role, especially when it comes to coaching, is the element of working with someone in a longer term capacity. So I've had the privilege of working with a few people over the course of their first year in recovery, and it's pretty incredible to see, and to be able to help resource them from, starting out unhoused and working through the criminal justice system to like finding sober living and getting into just more stable situations, whether it's connecting them to like job skills resources or that kind of thing. But ultimately, it starts with the like what do they want out of their recovery, and for some of us, it's total sobriety, and for others, it's a harm reduction point of view. And I think the peer support aspect, like Victor said, definitely stems from a non-judgmental place, being able to you know, ask questions that get people to better understand themselves and their own behavior and hopefully to find their own empowerment. Because I think what recovery ends up doing for a lot of us is it gives us an option of choice again, which we didn't have when we were in active addiction.
That was so well said, Carlisle. Thank you. And I know Chris, you wanted to add to that too.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it just builds perfectly off of that because, we can be someone who's has similar lived experiences, but if I'm telling you, hey, you need to do this and then you need to do this and then you'll get this outcome, that's not peer support. That's just, someone trying to control what you're doing. I think being knowledgeable, and I know like when I had all these trainings, it's like how to ask people what they need and be knowledgeable about what's available, and you can throw in a bit about what's worked for you, but really it's not about me and my story. It's about being a real conversationalist and being able to know what's available, what's out there, and what might be a good fit. But there's a very like there's a line there between telling someone what to do, informing of options. And I remember even that first training, Vicky said like, we can't be invested in people's outcomes. And it was really hard for me to wrap my mind around that because I think inevitably we do, but how do we keep coming back, with that same freshness and that same like, yeah, here's all the options and everything is available, and what will work best for you. And how can I support you in getting there?
Very well said. Thank you, Chris. Would anybody else like to add to that?
Yes, I would like to also add to that. I really love that. I know for me, it helped like give me a visual of like what I was feeling and how to really like notice it, like what I was seeing on the floor and what my capacity was to do as a peer support, because it's really easy to like want to carry them through everything and just know like where the boundaries are, what the different roles are that are happening outside of here that isn't peer support, and for us to not be able to, to know what that boundary is. But most importantly, it just taught me about like what sharing experiences means, how to really foster a place, a safe space for people to be understood, to be heard, to feel safe, and just to build that human connection that organically happens when those things are available to them.
Thank you, Christina. Would anybody else like to add before I jump in? I appreciate it. I do want to add that training, education, continued education has definitely been a defining point for me as well. Vic and I have had many conversations about this. I also do trainings for Advocates for Recovery Colorado, and it is that understanding in that toolkit of walking beside someone as a mutual aid support and not leading them and not pushing them and not guiding them per se, but really allowing them to write their own story and getting to be beside them while they do that. That's been a really critical part for me. That's something that I really like to hone in on when I do my trainings, is to not show up with an agenda, because it is the person leading their progress, and it's not to be defined by me, because then it's not a part of their recovery journey anymore, right? And so this speaks really strongly to one of the next questions that I'm excited to ask is, what training and supervision do peer support professionals receive to ensure that they are well equipped? And I know Victor touched on this some, and Chris touched on what he's learned from Vic, and Carlisle's touched on what they've learned as well. And I'm curious, like, for those of you who are working in this professional role, what were key components in your training that have really stuck with you through this?
For me, it was like I took certified addiction technician classes, and the most I'd say the class that stood out the most for that was motivational interviewing. Like Chris was saying, he was saying about meeting the client where they are. Part of peer support is, this worked for me, why doesn't it work for you? So meeting them where they are. There's the old adage that how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to want to change. So for me, like motivational interviewing helped me meet the client where they are and just sort of, okay, let's go this way, let's go that way. You can sort of get through the ambivalence. Uh, it's one thing not to have, an aura of judgment, but it's another thing when you start, putting your own things in there. So yeah, ethics training, it was, we have that, and there's other classes too. As a cat, you have to be supervised for 1,000 hours for an addiction specialist, among other specialists, and then the next level is like 3,000 hours. So it could take a good half a year of full-time employment to a year and a half, to really get the adequate supervision for higher licensing. But yeah, there's always licensing to pursue in this industry.
Thank you.
If I may,
Of course.
thanks. I'm also working towards my cat right now, Justin, and my most recent class was addictions counseling, and something that I found really useful was this like acknowledgement of, we use motivational interviewing, reflective listening, and paraphrasing, right, as we're working with people in an individual setting. And something that early on in my work, I struggled with the leaving room for silence. And I think, through that training, it kind of brought to my attention the importance of not only being able to listen, but being able to accept quiet moments for people to like just hold what they need to hold in a session, and not for us to just put our own discomfort out there. It's like sometimes we just have to be comfortable with that, and also leaving room for um for them to be able, like, I used to paraphrase and then jump into a question right after that instead of just like pausing. So that's something I'm probably still working on, but I found it to be a crucial piece, and I wouldn't have known that unless I take uh, besides taking these trainings.
Thank you, Carlisle.
Let's share. So this is the area that I'm really passionate about. Because through the training that I received, I learned to really listen with intentionality. And I'm here right now. Like, this is the best kind of training avenues for me, is right here, right now. listening to all of you who have so many strengths. And that's what I do. I listen and I highlight people's strengths and walk beside them. And I just feel it's super important for me to be present with people, and and to find out what works for them, so that I can be the cheerleader of that, and they're like, oh yeah, I do that, and yeah, that's badass. And that just celebrates them, and it helps with the dependency of like codependence. Like, I don't want them to be dependent on my recovery story. I want them to depend on their recovery story, because even in all the trainings, the perceptions that I'm receiving are going to be different from anyone else's perceptions of what this training and idea means to me. And so it's really important that I do listen, and I do take time to pause and to listen for their strengths and highlight that and be their cheerleader. So thank you.
Thank you, Leanne.
If I can just share briefly, something that stood out to me in the training was the ethics part of the work that we do. Just a beautiful reminder of how we are in a position of trust with people, and how to really remind ourselves all the time that, and really embed ourselves in that, because that's a big deal, to be in a trustworthy position and truly be trustworthy. So I really enjoyed that piece.
Thank you, Christina. Vic, I saw you come off mute.
Thank you, Dee, for bringing up the concept around training and supervision. For me, this is like a major red flag area. Most agencies do not have the resources to devote hundreds of dollars to peer training, and often lack peer supervisors for professional guidance. Clinical supervision isn't effective, and it doesn't support peers in their professional development. And honestly, when it comes down to training, it falls on the responsibility of the peer to advocate, to not give up, to say, hey, I want this class. Imagine having to pay $400 for a class when you're only making $20 an hour. It's a huge commitment, and it creates an obstacle to get the state certification, as that costs $300 as well. So if they're hungry and they have a desire, they have to be someone who's relentless. The same way in their recovery, they have to approach training. It can cost $800 to train a peer. And on top of that, you need 6 months of supervised or volunteer work. Um, and so I think for having a paid apprenticeship program is really what is needed to fill this gap.
Yeah, I would love to hear other thoughts. Chris, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, thank you. Just to build on that too, like, the whole training I really feel is super well laid out, and each section is very important. But on my personal journey through this, I know even after that first 6 months, I, wasn't feeling like super comfortable in the role, and really didn't start getting comfortable until much later. But I would say like I gained that greatest insight from like these spaces where I could debrief situations with peers and with more experienced peers. And really in that space, like, what would you do? How would you have handled this? And through like those circles, started gaining confidence and started gaining like insight, I think, into like how to support all those other areas of what being a peer is, whether that's like ethics or, boundaries, motivational interviewing. I mean, those are all skills, and each situation can be unique. So that's really where I've gained my most wisdom and feel like is ongoing training, and something I'm really excited about. And I think it's probably been going on longer than I've known, but I feel like too, the rise of these like, hyper focused like 1 day webinars, right? And they're usually free, and they focus on a very specific area. I really enjoy those. And then to like, as always, debriefing with my peers about what I've learned.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to add? I definitely hear that access to training and access to those hours is definitely a wall that many of us experience. And, there are organizations who do need to charge an arm and a leg for training. And for me, it's about ensuring the labor that's going into that training as well. So by ensuring that there's that commitment, and please hear me when I say that I often am struggling for gas money and still have to be able to find the funds to pay for certain trainings. And like Chris was saying, the free webinars that you can have access to build on those credentials needed for the Colorado Providers Association are accessible for free, but you really have to be careful when cherry picking them. So for organizations accepting payment, it allows an honor for the labor, maintaining a high quality programming, not saying that other programs that aren't free and more easily accessible aren't sustainable. However, there are the pieces of funding coming in from larger organizations versus nonprofit organizations that are needing to collect donations for these sorts of things. And so I know at Advocates, we remain committed to accessibility, and by investing in our work, we're helping build stronger, more resilient recovery community for everyone. And I do want to bring it back a little bit to the CAT, CAS credentialing and licensure. I have said more recently than not that becoming a state certified peer is not easy. You have 60 hours of education that you have to uphold, and then you have to obtain those 500 hours of work or volunteer experience. But if it's volunteer, it has to be very specific to peer work while still not towing the line of exploitation of work of these peers who, like Vic said, are hungry to go into this field and have purpose going into this field. So I really, again, it's kind of one of those open and unleft answered conundrums that we face of a lot of organizations bringing peers in, peer support professionals, and being authentic in the way that they support the professionals in continuing with their role. So I'm really glad that everybody spoke authentically to that and spoke about their experience with it. I just want to open it up one last bit before I move on. Carlisle, please.
I do have one quick addition. So I through my peer support training, I also received training for AcuDetox to become a practitioner for it's a 5-point needle acupuncture for those who aren't aware. And it does help with symptoms of like withdrawal cravings. It's specifically used to help with people in recovery experiencing addiction. The organization that does that is through Natural Highs, and they do offer scholarships for people who want to get trained. It is a 3-day intensive training, but it's something like certain groups are offering, uh, ways for training to be more accessible. I don't think that's across the board, but I figured I'd mention that.
And thank you, yes, because if you know to ask for scholarships, they appear. So sometimes, not always, sometimes. So yeah, I love that we really highlighted and expanded some of these challenges that we face. And we have been talking a lot about peer support professionals specifically and their role in supporting an individual or even a family member, because family support specialists are their own unique brand, their own unique walk of life, if you will. So my question for you all, and this is open to everyone, is along with the peer support professionals, how do recovery communities play a role in an individual or a family's recovery? This could include housing, this could include treatment.
I could jump in on this one. I mean, I think I'm very fortunate to work at one, here at Recovery Cafe Longmont, but we are few and far between. And even for us, that we have a membership model where there is a certain level of accountability that we ask for. So, I mean, if you're someone who is still struggling, then, we can't have you here right now. We can, invite you back. But I know once someone is in here, even if our requirement is just to be sober in the space, right? So, what am I trying to say with that? I think what I'm trying to say is that it's very important once you can get into the door, get into the community, and really see that you're surrounded by folks who have similar lived experience, a place to make new friends, a place to learn some different recovery capital things. But getting in the door and finding the recovery communities can be a hard thing. But it is really important. I know it really changed my life finding Recovery Cafe and a recovery community organization. So, yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
I can jump in real fast. So something that was important to me when I stepped into my role was having more of community engagement, specifically with the intersection of LGBT folks who are wanting more sober spaces. In my own active addiction, I found most places that I would go to that had LGBT people, it was, it's centered around alcohol. So, part of my programming has been building up on small support groups, active detox clinics, and then just sober events that involved music or art making and dance. Excuse me, just to engage people in a way that's it's more empowering, and it kind of helps reduce the stigma too, because I think gathering spaces are really what we need so that we can support one another in this process of like, oh, I don't need to rely on substances to have community. And oftentimes substance abuse takes us away from our communities, at least the ones who can uplift us.
Yeah, very well said. And I just want to highlight and underscore that when we are in active use, it really removes us from the community. And so then trying to find community without substances, there's more liquor stores than Starbucks there, down the street. So how do you find people outside of that community when that's the only community you know? That was well said. Thank you.
I would like to share. As a Latina from Latina culture, it is very well known that in our culture, we keep things to ourselves and we keep it within the family, and we go to family for support if we're struggling. And actively using and drinking was the kind of support that you get is, well, stop it. Well, don't do it. We'll get it together, And that's where I went to for support. They didn't know how to, because in our culture, it's not really a thing, and if it is, it's not really talked about. So coming into this line of like, my soul knew that I needed recovery before my mind could even comprehend it, because I didn't even know it was a thing yet, right? So when I would come to Recovery Cafe, I came in and I quickly left. And then I kept finding myself coming in, because that was the community that I needed. That was what that was the support that my soul was truly seeking. Therefore, I was apprehensive about sharing my experience. Like, we don't do that, So I was really breaking down some of those barriers that were like long embedded in me as since, forever. In my work now, that's the work that I see that I'm doing, is like when I do outreach, when I do Spanish or bilingual outreach or presentations, like we're trying to build that trust and allow people to feel safe, and that it's okay. We can talk about these things, and there is support for that. And I'll tell you what, when I go to these when I go to these presentations or these gatherings where I know the Latino people are going to be there, they're just like, they want to know everything. They have been the ones that have kind of felt what I have felt, like there's something out there, but I don't know where to go. I don't know where to access it. Where is it at? So when we go and we present ourselves and we show, and I show up and I'm like, look, I'm a Latina too in recovery, and I was able to do this and do that. And oh my God, you talk about these really like these things that happen to us as a Latina mother, as a child, as all these expectations that we have, and they don't believe me, or they don't see it right away. But it is a really unique way that we get connected, and they reach out for that support. So
I love that, Christina. You spoke so passionately about that, and thank you so much because it's true. It's very, very true. I've worked in the mental health substance use field for over 10 years. We have a bilingual coach here at Advocates, and reaching that community is such a challenge. It's such a challenge because where do you go to find that community? And when that community is seeking you out, like where did they even start? And I love what Victor put in the chat, and I would love to hear more about what you put in the chat, Victor, because I'm interested. I haven't heard about it.
Just the idea is peer support is not plug and play. So agencies are doing something and they say, hey, let's just bring a peer on and put them on the team. And that doesn't work. So if you have a multidisciplinary supports, oftentimes they say, well, it's a duplication of services if the peer does this because someone else is already doing that, versus taking a look at who's the best person to provide this service. So this toolkit is about what should we do before we bring peers on? How should we introduce them to the team? There's things in the toolkit about now that the peer is here, what should we do? So there's a timeline of like 30, 60, 90 days. And this is coming from a national organization that does a lot of things with peers called the Peer Center for Excellence. And so that's the link that is in the chat.
Thank you, Vic. Excuse me. Thank you so much. And I do want to circle back to what Christina was saying. Just real quickly before we move on with some of these questions, I do want to open it up to the rest of the panel of what are some other challenges that have been faced either by yourself or the community that you're serving in finding already existing supports.
I'll jump right back in if that's okay. And it's language, right? Like the language, stigma, breaking down that stigma and educating. So last summer, at the end of last summer, it could have been more, we decided to create a Spanish recovery circle for people who speak Spanish. And we created the circle here at the cafe, and nobody came the first week and nobody came the second week. It was just Jose and I, and nobody came the third week. And we sat there and we just kept doing the thing, and we are like, somebody's gonna come, just to have that faith. And then suddenly one person came, and it was great, and we thought for sure they were gonna come back, right? And then they didn't, and then nobody came, and then 3 people came, and then today we have 5 people in that recovery circle. So yeah, it's just about like seeing a need, trying to create something that will fill and support that need, putting it into play, and just waiting to see, like, I knew it would happen. Like, I felt it. I know I needed it. I needed it. Like, I know other people need it, right? So today there's 5 people that come, and we're just like really grateful for that. And now they have people, and they bring people, and they talk to people about the circle, and it's just really something that I'm really excited about, because that there it is, that it was never there before, and now it's here and it's available and it's free.
Thank you, Christina. Excuse me. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, Recover Cafe does a great job of like a lot of these guys that Tribe has here, they come in and the common theme is that they feel unwanted. and they feel ashamed, and when you're unwanted and ashamed, the last thing you're looking for is community. So we bring them up to recovery cafes sometimes, or sometimes we'll go. The Phoenix is another really good app as well that has sober activities, and you can search on GPS and everything. Um, but yeah, like when, Chris and Carlisle and Christina, they do an excellent job like greeting these guys, and they're a little bit, it's weird seeing somebody that just likes you, and it's probably been a very long time, since they've been a part of a community that where they feel like they're wanted. Sometimes it's just kind of that simple, but obviously community is the opposite of isolation, and isolation's addiction. So we usually take them to NA and AA once a day, 90 and 90. The stats are hopeful if they can make a commitment to community, especially after 90 days.
Thank you, Justin. Something I want to comment on too is like um, people who are experience like being unhoused also have a lot more stigma to work through, not just with the addiction piece, even though addiction by itself and getting access to treatment can have a lot of barriers and stigma attached to it. So something I'm still working on is like when I'm interacting with people who are, sometimes have a lot of intersections of being trans, being unhoused, being in recovery, and sometimes being veterans. And it's like, it can be difficult finding overlap with all of those things, So right now, I'm just trying to resource people in terms of like, well, what can housing look like? And, VCP, Veterans Community Project, we've been working with them and building a rapport and, just trying to make sure that where we're sending people is actually a safe space for them, and how can we as peer professionals and just like as a recovery network, how can we support each other with that process? So it's ongoing. It's going to continue to be ongoing.
Yeah. Excuse me, 100%. I mean, what I'm hearing is a lot of networking and a lot of what's working and knowing your community and knowing the community outside of that community and knowing places like Christina, thank you so much because now I know to send more people your way and hopefully you can send more people Dara's way. Dara is my bilingual coach. Shameless drop, sorry, but so I would love to be able to have that gap bridged and really just for sake of time, and I know like Michelle had said earlier, there's just so much that we can talk about and not enough in 2 hours. And so I'm hearing a lot about networking and growing that web, if you will, amongst the peer support professionals to offer for those resources. But I'm interested if anyone is able to highlight some gaps or like what is still missing as we all sit in different organizations to support each other, let alone our participants.
Dee, I will jump in right now just to remind everyone we're at 5:30, so we have about half an hour before we want to get to Q&A. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so in my experience, um, there are roles around me that may also engage in the stigma of people coming in and out of recovery. And that's a barrier that I witness. And so, in my role, I the only way to, or the way that I feel like I can celebrate myself is really to just focus on the person in front of me that I'm supporting and finding the resources in and out of the community at large. And so the biggest barrier that I see around me are the roles that still demonstrate this stigma of people coming in and out when it should be celebrated, in my opinion, and not punished or judged. That's what I see.
I love that, Leanne. Thank you. Because it's true. It's that judgment, it's that stigma, it's that fear of being rejected, right?
I just want to echo something that you said, Dee, and Vic said too, just about the piece of training and access to it, and also as in like ability to pay these peer support professionals, living wage with benefits and yeah, having there be multiple places options for peers to work. I mean, there's a few organizations, and I know it took us quite a long time to build this like great diverse staff. And once we were able to start offering those things, like that's really like makes this a makes this a job I want to stay in, and I hope the rest of the staff wants to stay in as well. But also I would love to have like some good competition. Like, hey, maybe peer amazing organization down the street is even pushing the, like they got great wages, they're a great place to work, they got people with lived experience and leadership and supervision. So I think having more options. I mean, I know if someone wants to get their 500 hours, there's only maybe 3 places I can think of to send folks. And then what's going to happen after that? I want to encourage folks to go down this path and know that they can build a career, but also, everyone can't work at Recovery Cafe, so yeah, that's just like things that are on my mind, and just wanted to echo what you both shared, and it's been shared in this group already, because I can think of, probably 4 or 5 folks right now who are going down the path, and I'm just like, where are you going to end up? Will you be taken care of? Will you have someone who's mentoring you and supervising you, that has been there before and cares about your continuing well-being and education and progression in the field, So, but it's a beautiful thing when it works, and I hope we're trending that way. I think we are, but yeah.
I love that, Chris. Thank you so much. Because it's so true. Like I could name 3 or 4 organizations that can support people who are coming out of training and need those 500 hours of work experience. And I'm wondering specifically, Vic, if there's something that you want to add to that. Is there more that you want people to know about, the supervision piece, how we can actively work in recovery communities, or how we bring recovery housing into that aspect of supporting people freshly out of training to move forward into this profession?
Sure. Let's just be frank. Recovery housing is not for everyone. So getting someone to the point where in recovery getting someone to that point can take months, addressing their physical needs, their mental health needs, their substance use needs. Those need to be addressed first. And so recovery housing sometimes comes in because there's a real lack of inpatient beds. So if we can't get you in a 20-day program, can you live at Tribe for 3 months and not mess things up, right? And so for some people, that is an alternative. Um, Also, the lack of affordable housing is another issue. And so if you're in recovery, you face extra barriers trying to access housing. And recovery housing allows people to get stability without being forced to pay $1,800 a month and have, 16 roommates. Um, there are also some local organizations that aren't represented here today. For example, Haven Ridge, the Bridge House, together, they offer housing as part of their program models, and those are examples of success in these areas. So being able to create low barrier entry points for people and build them up with multiple supports. As Carlisle said, it's not just about sobriety. It could be about medication management. So the part of recovery housing is really connected to holistic recovery, right? So we support the whole person. And that's really the foundation of success.
I love it. Thank you. Would anyone else like to add to that? Because it's a community, right? It's a recovery community. So how do we bridge those gaps that exist? And I love that you Thank you, Vic, for bringing in Haven Ridge and Bridge House and those organizations as well, because hopefully for panel part 2, we can have them join us. Would anybody else like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, there's something, I mean, it's not related to recovery housing, but it just sparked something in my mind, that's just so vital to this role. And something I've had to learn too is that you have to be a peer who's able to have someone go through a different pathway than you. I've run across, and I've even had to challenge myself on this, like, what made me think of this is like, medication management, MAT. You got to be, even if that wasn't your recovery pathway, you still got to support that as an option. Same with like you're talking about sober living. Like maybe that worked for me. Maybe it's not going to work for you, but just providing all those options equally and without coloring any sort of this way is better than that. That was a part of training that really blew my mind, was the amount of options, and I know my brain was going to like, well, this worked for me, I don't think that would work, who knows about that, but like that's not my job, right? My job is to be like, there's this plethora of options and experiences, and all are equally valid, and one could work for you, one could work for me. But that, just what you just said, sparked that, and wanted to touch on that for a bit, because I think that's the beauty of the position is, you know, maybe 12-step work great for you, and maybe SMART work great for you, and MAT and some combination of those three. But how can we support all those and know all those? And that's where like these conversations and those peer groups really come in handy. I learned so much, about resources and different avenues through that. Tangent over. Sorry.
No, thank you, Chris. I love it because it's like the perfect segue into one of my favorite sayings that I have coined from AFR is there are just as many pathways to recovery as there are people in recovery. And that's huge. So to kind of encompass everything that's been said, and I want to open this up to the entire panel, what challenges, if someone in the audience wanted to support bridging some of these gaps or some of these challenges that are already existing, what are ideas, thoughts, suggestions from the professionals in this role of making recovery support more accessible, however that looks for the individual?
I would say get off of Nextdoor, right? Get off of social media. Um, so the challenge is, I think, is some of this false narrative in Boulder. For example, we're a magnet for homeless folks. And there's also this NIMBY, not in my backyard attitude. When Together used to be the source, was going to build a homeless team shelter where people can live, there is huge pushback in the community. So you have a small portion of people here. Another example is a homeless day center. It'd be much more successful. It was located in the center of town and an easily accessible hub where many people will come. The community said, hell no, we don't want this homeless day center here in the middle of town. So it was forced to relocate to North Boulder. And that's just not having the best results. So I think community members can really help by, again, getting off things like Nextdoor and getting involved with, the multiple organizations that are out there working with people who live and work in Boulder County.
Thank you, Vic.
I wanted to highlight a model that Recovery Cafe does. They do like storytelling workshops, and I think part of why so many people are like averse to helping those who are very underserved is because they don't know us, they don't know our stories, and in a way, especially people who experience homelessness, they tend to be the most dehumanized. So I think if there's a way to connect people with like it, if we can connect them to their stories for again, because like I think being able to share your story is a really empowering thing. And for some of us, the first time we ever get to experience that is in maybe like the rooms of 12-step programs or smart recovery, or in this case recovery cafes workshops. And, I'm wondering like if there's a way to build off of that and hopefully to connect to people who have stake or like power in making these decisions, like Vic said, the community that there was pushback from, if there's a way for us to connect with those members too, so to show that like if they're in support of the work that we do, it means that, the folks who are experiencing homelessness can hopefully get out of that with the right support.
Well said, Carlisle. Thank you.
Or I would also like highly encourage if you know somebody who is, maybe has said something about, the unhoused population or things happening in their community and they're not really sure, like, or maybe they have the wrong outlook on it. We have a gentleman, this is just an example, we have a gentleman who lives in our community, and he started noticing people, sleeping in his alley or, walking down his street, and they were unhoused, and he was really afraid of them and didn't know how to talk to them. And he ended up coming into the cafe, not sure what to expect. And he's a member now. He is a member and he gives back so much to this community. And I remember talking with him and I asked him, so what finally brought you in? And he's like, well, I wanted to know what was happening in my community. I wanted to know why I kept seeing this, and I wanted to know how to talk to them, to the people who are unhoused. And I said, okay. And what do you think now? He's like, well, I'm no longer afraid. So by him just kind of putting himself in places where the unhoused community lives, or maybe maybe in other places, maybe at the hub or at a shelter or something, maybe do some volunteer work. Encourage them to do volunteer work at these places where they could learn more about what's really happening in the community without just having an opinion or judgment about it.
I love that. Thank you.
My effort would be in celebrating the peers that are here and the peers that are out there doing the work, and what is the best avenue to bring together that collaboration like this so that we can talk about challenges that our people that we're serving are experiencing, and how best to support that, whether it's in your organization, my organization. And it sounds tricky because there's all this HIPAA stuff and there's all these things that are in the way. Um, because like here, there's leadership meetings and then there's team meetings, and we've had peer meetings in the past, and it wasn't highlighted enough, I feel, by our leadership in order to keep it glued together. And there was one person, this person is present here, who was attempting to, piece that together, and people wouldn't attend. It wasn't made a priority. And so I feel like, even if it's just in my particular organization, that it be a priority that peers can come together to discuss certain challenges, and to discuss how, what have you tried? What has worked for you? And to piece that together and to help one another. I think that would really help the impact of how we as peer professionals can give to our people who are in recovery. And I would like to see that. I don't know how to do it. I can't do it alone, but I would like to see that.
Thank you, Leanne. And we might be small, but we are mighty, right? Did anybody else want to highlight any gaps or how we could collaborate more with other sources in the recovery community?
Yeah, I would like to jump in, just to borrow a great line from, the mental health movement, like nothing for us without us, and I think that's true in every level of organization or company. And then too, just to speak to, the organizations present here tonight, I think if you're interested and it feels appropriate to bring on peers, to tap someone like Vic or Dee, on this call to be like, what does that look like? What is the structures I need to put in place? What are the support systems, even if they're outside your organization, I need to put in place to support these professionals in this role? How can I collaborate, and get the peer professional support outside of the organization? I think those things can really help, build these bridges and help kind of take away this island that we can sometimes be on. And I think one more thing too, I know it can feel, and I know I'm guilty of this as well. I just speak from my own experience, right? Like I'm someone in recovery, like I want to keep that, keeping that private, or, like I don't want to have big windows at our new space or something like that. I think we really need to get away from that because, there's people in recovery, um, up and down in every which way in every walk of life. And, we have health food stores and we're so proud to walk in there and be like, oh, I'm eating healthy now. So I feel like our recovery spaces should be like that. Like, yeah, I'm doing good things for myself. I'm walking in here proud. I think that one's more for us, but yeah, I think those are my big kind of takeaways and gap fillers that would help move this forward. And to like increased access to training and really recognizing the role as a professional role and having a great career path, um, to stay in this work, because it really is amazing work.
I love everything you just said, Chris. I hope someone was taking notes because I would love to have that on a placard somewhere. Like no longer living on an island alone, right? Together we shall conquer. But in all seriousness, this has been an absolute honor to be a part of this tonight. And I do want to hand it over to Michelle and Morrison because we are nearing the end of our time. And so I want to allow for some Q&A from the audience.
Thanks, Dee. And first of all, I know it's Michelle and I who hold the honor of being able to have convened this panel and get to hear from all of your voices on all of these issues. And I really appreciate all the candor and authenticity that you all bring and not shying away from the difficult parts of this conversation as well. So thank you. And before we get into the Q&A, I just want you all to know that there's been some love coming through in the chat and in other channels. I heard from one person who had to jump off a little bit early that this was such an impactful meeting and that she expressed being extremely grateful to all of you panelists and guest speakers. But without further ado, getting into the Q&A session, we would love to invite folks to use the raise hand feature or come off mute with questions, but we also had a few come through in the chat. So I'll start with those. First of all, how can people find recovery communities like the ones in Recovery Cafe Longmont or in Tribe? Like what is that connection point if they're looking for those services for themselves or a loved one?
It's funny you say that. Most of our intakes at Tribe, they're from word of mouth, just so crazy. We have a website, phone number, email list, all that. But most of it is it's crazy, just word of mouth. As far as communities go, it's not really, my forte, but I've found some good luck with the Phoenix app, which is now called New Form. A lot of activities going on within 10-mile radius, and honestly, like teaching, for me at least, teaching these guys that you can have a life that's based in sobriety and still have fun. It's key because it's just the thought of that when they come in versus when they're going out is just like, what are you talking about? You can't have a good time without alcohol. But, the more they get out there in these communities, the more they realize like this is all right. So yeah, it's really important. Internet and really just word of mouth, I guess.
That is definitely a challenge that we face as well. I know a lot of advocates for recovery, sober community events, our all recovery meetings, the rally for recovery. It's all via social media and word of mouth. And the amount of people who show up for the word of mouth. But I know, and Leanne probably can help me remember the name of this better, but it's a hub, something hub. I'm drawing a blank, but there's like a website where people can look for recovery resources. And I know hub is in the name. At least I want to
Do,
believe it is.
do you mean Well Minds Connection? That
I
used
think
to
that,
be they used to be the hub, and they are now called wellmindconnection.org for anybody who's looking for resources or to get connected can go there.
thank you.
Yeah, I know another hub that's come up is the Find Help website is also new and live. So sorry, Christina, I'm not sure if you were going to jump in.
I was just going to say that findhelp.com is also on there. I feel like we do a really good job of doing the outreach in the community where we are. We do some outreach here at the Boulder County Courts. I also facilitate a recovery circle at the local halfway house. So when people are transitioning out of Department of Corrections or Boulder County Jail, I'm there every Tuesday at 1:30 to facilitate a recovery circle in Spanish and or in English, whatever. But it's a time where I really get to meet people right when they arrive, and then just kind of like we'll do a recovery circle, but we also do much more than that. We do a check-in, and I'm just like their resource, also I'm happy to guide them all the time if they're looking for something else that is outside of the cafe or if they're looking, I'm very passionate about, getting people like jobs and helping them, find what job fits them or ask them questions about what they like to do and or what would they like to see themselves doing. So utilizing those resources that I have that I've been given to help others in the community. And it's magical the way it happens. You just talk about it, you share what you know with these people that are like needing these resources, and then they tell that person, and then so on and so on. So I'm really glad that I have the opportunity to do that with them. So thank you.
Did you have anything to add, Chris? Or...
Yeah, sorry, I was like keep my volume on for some reason. But yeah, and I'd just like to brag a little bit about Christina and her work. I mean, that's just one group that Christina does. She's also in many of like the integrated treatment courts and like really making partnerships, across from, the justice system to local community groups to Habitat for Humanity. I mean, Christina's really everywhere, and that's like one of her superpowers is like really meeting people where they're at outside of the cafe walls. Um, but yeah, here at the cafe, I mean, I think but we're lucky here in Boulder, right? I mean, you can go up to Rocky Mountain Equity and hear about everything that's happening in the county. I know come to Recovery Cafe, and even if this isn't your home, like we're totally happy to share about all the other recovery organizations around. So I feel very lucky here. I mean, looking at this call, I know you could walk into any one of our doors and learn about everything going on here in Boulder County. And one thing too I wanted to share is I think it's an exponential effect to the power of these recovery communities because like Justin was sharing, like you can get hooked up with a workout group, or, I met another gentleman who's I'm a big reggae fan, and he's a reggae fan and, like let's go to a concert together and keep each other sober, and have fun. And so it's like an exponential effect, like you may meet here, but what happens outside of these walls too is really um, where a lot of growth happens, and we meet other folks who are, in recovery and living life.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, we will be collecting the websites and some of the contact information for these groups and services and putting that together in a follow-up email. Some other questions that came through in the chat are concerned with how organizations can support peer professionals. And so specifically for organizations looking to create a peer professional workforce pipeline, what recommendations would you offer to create a culture of peer integration? And I do know that Victor is still on this call. He's now on his mobile, so I'm unable to pin him to the panel, but just so everyone knows, he's still here.
Vic, would you like to speak to that first, or shall I?
I would just say that a pathway for state certification is definitely one of those pipelines. Don't just bring someone on board and have them work with clients and have zero training, but how can we support helping someone to get certified and also taking chances on people? So hiring someone with a criminal background that's still on probation, versus trying to hire someone who, they drink a few beers in college, but they're working on their masters. Like, oh, that's a great peer, but that's not the folks we're looking for to establish rapport and connection. So, being able to take chances, but also when they walk away from this position, they have something to take with them. And the certification supports that.
Yeah, and I just would like to add my own personal experience to that. Getting my state certification for peer and family support specialist was daunting and challenging, and I had the support of my organization. But if I were to offer suggestions for people in the audience, sponsorship for training, sponsorship for taking the ICRC exam, creating firm understanding in what the peer support professional role is and what that means for your organization, as well as what does the career growth look like for that? Can they become a peer support professional supervisor? Please hear me when I say that, Advocates has a peer support supervisor training. It doesn't mean that we train only peers. There are tons of clinicians out there who supervise peers as well. And to be able to offer the education for what the difference is, because I'm constantly saying the peer lane and the clinical lane are super parallel, but they are super separate. And so to continue that growth and that potential for professional development in this role, there's so much opportunity to do that. And it starts with education and sponsorship for education.
Thank you. If anyone doesn't have anything else to add to that question, I'll go ahead and move on. There were a couple of questions that I think you all have touched on around the professional support. Another question I want to bring forward from the chat is, what are the supports you have seen work best to help people repair harm with loved ones that may have been harmed during folk substance use?
I could jump in on this one. Or Justin, if you would like to go
Oh,
first.
I was going to say Al-Anon. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, and just to build off of that, friends and family and smart recovery is another great one. And I really like smart recovery because, you can come with, your loved one who you may have harmed, and the meetings happen simultaneously. Both meetings are separate and unique to that experience. And you can leave, and both have gained something and something to talk about. And I know something too bright collaborative here in Longmont is a restorative justice organization, and they're starting to do some more structured like healing circles. There's restorative justice, I think, too, is a great avenue, and I feel like it's finally starting to be like integrated into like beyond just the justice system, for community harms and stuff like that. Yeah, there's some great pathways.
And if I may, I'd like to build on what Chris has said and offer family support specialists. They are unicorns in the field. I know a lot of people are very familiar or might not be familiar with CRAFT. It's an acronym. But really understanding the authenticity of the wellness of the family members as well and what that looks like. Because I know for me in my active addiction, the wake of destruction I caused for those in my immediate circle, they needed their own type of support instead of focusing on what was going to fix, solve, or save me, but really focusing on their own mental wellness, on their own. I mean, we have a co-facilitator for one of our trainings here at AFR who often speaks about the fact that she lived off of Zantac for 6 months when her daughter was going through her adventures. And at AFRC, we have a family peer support specialist who is, devoted to supporting the family members in avenues other than craft. And another organization that's not represented here today is A Way Forward. And I know the last time I spoke with them, they had a family support specialist who had an incredible story. So there is peer support for individuals who don't necessarily have experience with active addiction or mental unwellness, but being the family member of that individual. So I think talking more and offering more to those who have the lived experience of being the family member is really critical.
Yes, I would also say craft is a great resource. Adriana at Luna Cultura runs a craft group for Spanish speakers. Mila Long, also and Trina Fats run the group for folks in Boulder. Some of these are online or in person, but it's a great resource for family members.
Thank you. Another question we had come through in the chat is, how do you see recovery going for people who are resourced but causing harm in their middle class addictions, those in suburbs or quote unquote white collar crime? And Erica, feel free to come off mute if you want to add anything to that question or clarify.
I'm just newly to living in the suburbs, and I'm actually more uncomfortable in this environment than going to an urban space because there's so much disconnection. It's like people can really isolate, and there's not the need can just be so masked with material comforts that it's it's not as visible, and yet I just think it's a part of our social fabric why we have all these intersection intersecting issues. If people in the suburbs are not able to engage with civics or community as much as they could, um, yeah, I think that says maybe enough.
So one thing I'd like to point out, at least like with our field in the peer support realm, is that like everything, hopefully everything that we do and everyone that we work with is here in a voluntary capacity. I know that that's not always the case, especially people involved with the criminal justice system. And I know that you mentioned like the white collar crime aspect of it. But to be honest with you, at least in my experience so far as a peer specialist, like most of the people I've worked with have been under-resourced. So, people in these positions are, I think, less likely to seek help because they might not see themselves as needing help. Um, or they might not see like their demographic reflected in the centers that we are operating in. So, you know, honestly, that's a tough question because I don't think I have an answer for you, but I think it's a good question because I see this perpetuation of harm, and I'm sure some of us have experienced it in our own, lives. Like grew up in a household with an alcoholic family member who didn't seek help for a very long time, and in part because he was in the realm of like the functional alcoholic space until he eventually wasn't. Because if you're in it long enough, you become dysfunctional. So yeah, I think in that case, it's almost like people like that don't get involved unless they have to, which isn't always the best route. Because I think for a lot of us, we try to operate from a realm of like we're working with people in a voluntary who voluntarily come, at you know most of the time.
Nothing like a good voluntold to do something. But yeah, that's a great question. I think it goes a lot to stigma, right? Like I've seen it here, where someone comes in and it's like, hey, I'm new in recovery, but I think I want to be a volunteer, because there is a stigma against like maybe I'm not one of those people when really it's all the same, I mean, there's a wealth of different 12-step pathways. One of my first jobs working in a casino, so learned about Gamblers Anonymous right away. There's tons of specialized groups, but there's also things like, I feel like I'm pushing one more than the other, but I'm really not. It's just the one I'm most familiar with. But Smart Recovery talks about harmful behaviors, right? And that could be anything. And I really love that language because, all the feelings, all the actions are the same. It's just, maybe what we're doing is different, but we can relate to all those different things. And that's a great tool, I think, too, of being a peer is like maybe I haven't done the exact same thing you have done, but I know the feeling. I know the struggle. I know like what it took for me to get out of what I was in. So I think too broadening our knowledge of those things and back to like reducing the stigma, whether you're in a big house or whether you're not, it shouldn't matter, you know, but it does. But I think we can help break down that stigma and also just be super knowledgeable about different pathways and pathways that talk about harmful behaviors instead of specific things. And what are the pathways that do talk about specific things that would work for that person?
I say, bring them into me. I'll see them. Just bring them. I got them.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. That is all that came through in the chat for questions. But again, we certainly have time for folks to come off mute if they have anything they'd like to ask our panelists.
Got one I was really bummed I didn't say earlier, and it's just a quick one, but it's so important, is especially us as peers, but if you're an organization supporting peers as well, supporting your peers and having a robust recovery space outside of your space and your people and coworkers. And also like encouraging like robust, full life, whether that's hobbies or being politically active or being just encouraging that full life. Maybe that's something more unique to Recovery Cafe because we are a recovery support organization, but I know it's something we talk about a lot is what are you doing to take care of yourself outside of Recovery Cafe, and what are your interests, what's filling your cup, that maybe isn't even recovery related. And I think like Justin earlier talking about the Phoenix, yeah, that whole life support, we talk about those pillars, and I think that should be continually talked about even after training.
Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I got on a little late, but I'm with the Workforce Boulder County. I'm the Disability Program Navigator. But my my job before this, I was doing substance abuse uh, uh, prevention in the Crimson Red state of Arkansas. So we were not even allowed to talk about harm reduction when that was actually what was going on. But my question is, um, what does it? How do you feel it looks like for um, agencies like workforce, agencies like human services? Um, how can we provide effective assistance to individuals who are in recovery without doing more harm?
Validate, the humanness of a need and send them to places that can offer the support. We're talking about people who experience addiction, and um, a lot of times these addictive behaviors are a mask for a mental health um, diagnosis, and that's how I began. I began as a peer supporter, working with people experiencing mental health symptoms, and um, so there's all these underlining comorbidities related to the addiction, the mental health component, trauma, life, and it's really important to validate people as humans and really try to navigate an avenue and a path that meets all of their needs, not just the addiction recovery needs, but maybe they need support with mental health medications or therapy. Um, and so it's really just seeing people and supporting them as a whole.
I'll just jump in and say, just asking the individual, what is going to support you the most in this moment? What do you need from me? What does your path look like? What do you want to do? Asking the individual, because that's the thing about, for me, mental wellness and recovery and navigating being a sober parent is my pathway is significantly different than another individual who is experiencing mental health adventures and recovery and navigating being a sober parent. So I think the most critical thing that I can offer is asking the individual what they need.
I think just to build on that, there's a TED talk I really like, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but everything you thought you knew about addiction is wrong. I think that's a great perspective from someone who's not in recovery to supporting folks, who may still be in active, substance misuse. I think that really gives a good perspective on what to do and how to help, and how to also set boundaries, and reduce stigma. And just want to give a big shout out to Robert, because I see Robert everywhere in the community. And if you're looking for another resource, like Robert's a great one. And so glad to see you on this call.
I really like this question too, because I find myself being able to just ask people what they need. I mean, I'm going to go back to the work that I do at LCTC, at the local halfway house here in Longmont. A lot of the people that I interact with have been unhoused, and then they get in trouble, and then they're in this process where they're actually given this opportunity to do something and change that. And that's why I find it so important to like meet them there. And for me, it comes easy. I'm like, what do you need? What are you doing? What do you want to do? Just, and they open up and they're like waiting for somebody to ask them what they need. And yeah, so for me, it's something that like really just comes naturally, and that I utilize all the resources again to do that. I mean, um, you need a job. Well, do you have an ID? So then do you have an ID? Do you have this? Do you have that? And, sometimes those questions are very personal to people. Like, well, no, I don't have an ID because maybe I don't have papers. I'm undocumented. Well, then that's a barrier too that we face. We try to navigate like what happens in that case. Or maybe I want to get an ID, but I don't have a birth certificate. And things that are like hard to ask people. Well, where's your birth certificate? How do you get it? These things. But I have I guess, a special gift in asking people like, these personal questions, and they're just like really opening up to letting me know. So I love that you shared that, Dee, is just asking them, asking them what they need, and they'll let you know.
I have a question, and I'm so grateful to the panel members and everybody on the call. You've opened my eyes to the availability of resources in Boulder County that would be so helpful for people with addiction issues and family mental health issues. I heard it stated earlier that at the conclusion of this program tonight, there would be a summary of resources available. Am I hearing that correctly? And that will be in a subsequent email. And then the potential that there'll be a follow-up session also. Could you comment on that?
Yes, so we will be collecting all of the great links and resources that folks are sharing in the chat, in addition to the contact information for the panelists and the services provided by their organizations, which we will put out in a follow-up email, since we have everyone's emails who registered for this Zoom. As far as a potential follow-up, this is something that we're still kind of exploring, but we knew even in coming together for this amazing panel tonight that there was no way we were going to be able to cover everything about peer support services in the recovery community in Boulder County in a 1 hour session. So we are exploring what potential topics and focus areas we would want to bring forth in a 2.0 or second convening of this topic.
Well, thanks again. You folks are doing the things that the work that saints and angels are supposedly doing. So thank you very much.
I know we are getting a little bit short on time, but I want to bring forward, there are a few really good questions in the chat. I'll ask, when you think about the broader community spectrum of behavioral health supports, including prevention, treatment, etc., are there gaps that really stand out for you outside of recovery that would have helped people more on their path if they were filled by peer support professionals?
Yes, 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 yes. Peer support professionals are essential, like Christina said, gifts in society that where we give to other people that are like-minded, like us, who are also gifts and deserve a chance and deserve respect and deserve the dignity to engage in whatever programs or services that they need. So yes, peers are essential, and we are here and we are not going away.
I just love Leanne's passion because it gets me riled up because I'm like, yes, I know for me, my journey would have looked so different if I had had a peer support professional early on in my recovery journey. And this was over 10 years ago. And if I can offer an answer in a story, one of the most profound things that happened for me in my recovery journey was when I had a paid professional cry while telling me a story because he was never going to know what absolute citron tasted like. And it was in that moment that I had an instantaneous connection with him because he was sharing his lived experience. He was offering hope and he was offering optimism that I too had the ability to become a paid professional. And he wasn't a peer because I don't know that peers were really that well talked about 10 years ago. However, I now get to embody that for somebody else. And I know everybody else in this room gets to do the same. So I think that peers are the most critical component for somebody who is experiencing vulnerability because of stigma and shame and guilt in their early recovery and wellness.
I'll probably jump in. In my personal experience with recovery, I mean, obviously for anyone experiencing, well, maybe this isn't obvious, but for people experiencing addiction, it can be really difficult to imagine what the future looks like because, you're so like enmeshed um, in just trying to maintain the addiction so that you don't have to undo stuff from the past that might have led to the addiction. And then like oftentimes I didn't see myself as having an option of a future until I got into recovery. And even then, with a couple years of sobriety under my belt, it wasn't until I became a peer specialist and even knew that this was an option for a career path that like my healing felt, it was like almost more tangible because I could do something with it. I could do something with my own experiences and contribute to the community in a profound way. And I would say that that's kind of what this field offers us is this ability to connect with people based on our lived experiences and the professionalism of the field. And then it kind of gives us an opportunity to show others that there is a future with this.
I think I want to answer the question, like great answers. I don't think I could add any more to that, but I want to answer it from a slightly different perspective of like when someone gets into recovery, and us as peer professionals are a very important piece of the puzzle. But once they are in recovery, and then it's like now it's time for me to get a job, but wait a minute now, like maybe I have a felony, so I can only get a minimum wage job, working nights somewhere, or my head is clear, but now I realize I might need some like mental health support, all these things that surround us that maybe we first we focus on the acute need of getting sober, right? And then but so many times I've seen like those barriers of like job not being felon friendly. Now I'm having some mental health challenges. Like those things really set folks back because there's not access there, or it takes 6 months to see a therapist. I'm brilliant, but I can't move forward in my work because of my background. I think those gaps are crucial to like helping sustain a healthy society as a whole, right? I mean, I'd love to see a stat that tells us how many people have a criminal background or a felony on their record, because I think that I know I do, right? So but I know I can do great work, right? And I can really help, whether it's a business, an organization, a community. But maybe I can't because of that. So I think reducing the stigma is huge, recovery friendly workplaces, felon friendly workplaces, those kind of things too are essential aftercare in mental health access, seeing a therapist, access to peer groups, like what are we doing once we have some sustained sobriety and ready to grow.
Thank you all for your answers to that, and especially Chris, what you brought forward at the end. Vic did mention a resource for promoting recovery-friendly workplaces, which speaks to some of what you were bringing forward. So we will certainly include that in the follow-up. The last question for our panelists before we wrap up that I want to bring forward is somewhat directed to you, Leanne. There was a question about doing a mental health focus for the Peer Support 2.0 panel, should we choose to have it. And I wanted to ask about the value of peer support professional roles for folks who might have a mental health condition but are not necessarily struggling with addictions, and where you see that.
And Leanne, I'm going to jump in as the person who promised to keep track of time for us to say we have about 2 minutes left, but this is an important question we want to make sure you get to address. So thank you.
That's where my expertise is working with people who experience mental. It's really important to me to meet them where they are, to see them as a whole person, and to overcome barriers of fears and judgment, and um, and to just really support the navigation of of gentleness and getting them connected by walking with someone one on one, to schedule, to meet with a therapist, to meet with a care coordinator, to connect them to a person who can help them with their benefits, to can advocate for people and be a voice with them, not for them, but with them. And that is so important to me. So yes, that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Leanne. And oh, Christina, go ahead.
I just want to say one last thing. When I was going through all the things, it was a lot of different organizations that stepped in to help me and guide me in therapy and therapists, all the things. And the ones that wanted, my mother told me, I wish, and they prayed, and I wish that my daughter would be put in the path that people can help her, because my family couldn't help her. So that's what happened for me. And in my work, that's what I see. That's what I envision. We are put in the path of the people's parents or family members who want help for their loved one, to help them in whatever they're going through. So that's what I do.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the heart that you bring to this space and all of your time this evening. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle to wrap us up.
Thanks, Morrison. I think just listening to this conversation, we've been here together for 2 hours and we've gone really deep, right? The goal of this whole thing was let's do a one-on-one on peer support professionals in the recovery community in the county and look at how deep we're going. And there's clearly more to be said. So like I said in the beginning, and we touched on it, right? There are many other partners who are in this work. I want to give a shout out also to our partners. I think some of whom are here from our Division of Homeless Systems and Coordinated Response. They're all part of this work and integrated as well. And there's so much more we could talk about. So we will explore continuing this conversation in a future episode of our Spotlight series. So hopefully, panelists, please take a look at the chat. You have so many people who are saying great things about what you shared here. And we really want to thank you. Thank you, Dee, for being such a phenomenal moderator of this. Thank you to all of the panelists for everything you contributed, for sharing your stories, for being vulnerable, and really helping to shed more light for our community members who are here to understand how they can get connected either themselves or a family member or a loved one, how there is something more out there that's possible that they might not have known about coming in to tonight's conversation. So thank you. We're so grateful and proud to get to work alongside you. Like Morrison said, we will send out that follow-up email to everybody who registered and attended. If you are not on our regular email list, though, and you would like to be, so this is for us reaching out to say, hey, we're having another conversation, or there's a different topic, or there's important information we want to share with our community and you'd like to receive those, please put your email in the chat so we'll get that to you. get you on that list so you get those other emails from us. We will be looking at our next convening. Our intention for the Spotlight series is to host these quarterly. So we'll be looking at doing another one over the summer, which we're really excited about. And then if there are any follow-up questions or other information people have, whether it's about tonight's topic, about getting connected to something that you heard about here, or if it's about the behavioral health roadmap and the county and our communities' big vision for how we can address all of these needs together. We will put our contact information in the chat for Morris and myself with a link to the roadmap too. So most of all, thank you everyone who attended tonight. We so appreciate you. We know what it means to give up 2 hours of your time, especially late in the day. Thank you for being here, and we will look forward to having our future conversations together. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.